Hello there, and welcome to another episode of the Quantum Bridge with myself, Casper, and with Gary, my co-host. And we're very fortunate to be joined today by Corina. So I'm going to pass over now to Gary.
Welcome to the show, Corina.
Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. So, as it's your first time here, maybe you can tell the audience a little bit about yourself. Obviously, we're aware that you come from Germany originally. So how you ended up in the UK and what it is you do for work now. Just a little bit of background about yourself, that'd be great.
Yes, sure. Well, yes, you very rightly said, I grew up in Germany and I came to London on a couple of school trips when I was like 16, 17. And I always kind of felt I wanted to come and live in London. There was no particular reason. I had no particular time frame on this, and once I finished sort of my education and my studies were in hotel management, I started working in hospitality. So I came to London and I started working in hospitality in some of the 5-star hotels. And this is how I sort of fell into this field, what is very dominating my life now, which is Middle East. So I started working with a lot of clients from the Middle East. And when I say Middle East, I mean predominantly Gulf region. So like Saudi Arabia, UAE, Qatar, Oman, Bahrain, Kuwait. And of course, sort of like back then, there really wasn't that much information and there wasn't really anything you could find. It was also, the culture was so alien to me because, I was German, they were Middle Eastern. I'd never even come in contact with anybody. So basically everything that happened when I dealt with these clients, I learned, I asked questions, I traveled out there, and I've been doing that for sort of like 20 years. And now what I do is I educate companies and people that have projects in the Middle East or that deal with Middle Eastern clients over here in the UK, and educate them about culture and how they can forge better relationships with the clients and how they can just make their service just so much better. Because I think, knowledge is power. And I wish I had somebody at the time to guide me and explain me how all the names work and what to do and what all these dates mean. And there just wasn't anything like that. So here I am creating this for everybody else.
Is that a niche you'd say that you have created for yourself, or is it something? Obviously, there's other hospitality services, but you added that little bit of uniqueness to your offer in that sense.
I mean, I think like my service now is not just for hospitality. I think like we've worked with other companies as well. But I think hospitality gives you a really unique insight because you start learning a lot more about clients. You learn more about, let's say, the family structure, what people like. You also start, looking into small details that can make a real big difference. And I think that's some of the things that we teach now. But I think now also, like, the world has moved on. There's so much social media. There's so many more ways of how you can utilize all these tools that you have at your disposal that before never even existed, and now like with your phone, you can form these relationships and you can keep these relationships and nurture them. And this is just so much easier. I mean, back when I started, like you'd have a number for, let's say, a palace in Saudi, and you would call up and who you were gonna get was anyone's guess, like, okay, maybe you were lucky and you had somebody that you could talk to, but now you can actually talk to the principals and to the people that really matter, like on WhatsApp, for example. And that's just like a massive advantage, I think, of how we have developed and how I think, we have access to more information. But I think I feel now it's almost like you have too much information. You go on Google and then you don't know, oh my God, what is right, what is wrong. So for me, I think it's very much speaking from experience. And again, also, like, we should not forget, I'm not, like, I'm German. I don't speak any Arabic. I'm a woman, which is a big thing normally, where people are like, oh, you're a woman in the Middle East. Like, how can this even work? So it's like it taps into all of these kind of details, and that's kind of what I want to help other people now with, to understand the culture and say, actually, it's a beautiful culture. You just need to open yourself and know a few things and educate yourself, because the media is not doing it for us.
Yeah, the great thing I'd say from listening to that is that you're somebody that's actually been through that process from scratch. So the ability to handhold from somebody who has been through something and faced all of those various barriers, that does give you, to me, a great advantage doing this. And then also you do have the ability to understand and to see firsthand the types of media information, for example, that we do receive in the West, certainly in the UK. And then you can somehow balance that, hopefully, in terms of your various clients on both sides, and say, well, look, there may be some truth in parts of this, but also I've seen X and Y. So do you think that again, that's something that that you can bring in terms of a level of comfort to those people you're involved with?
Oh, yes, 100%, because I think you just need to look at like the recent World Cup in Qatar, and you could see like the coverage was so biased for like, oh, people don't go there and they don't do this and this is not good. And it was so funny because I spoke to people that were very apprehensive before going. And then once they went, they were like, oh my God, everything you said was right. People are so nice. They're so hospitable. We didn't really mind that there was no alcohol in stadiums. There were no drunk people. It was more like a family type event. And it was actually really beautiful. And I was like, oh my God, I wish more people knew about this. So that's why I kind of feel it's a little bit also my mission to sort of spread that, because I feel, people are very misunderstood. And sometimes I think you need to separate maybe politics from the countries and from what people are and what the country itself has to offer. Just because you don't agree with a certain policy or a certain thing in the religion doesn't make all people bad.
Yeah, and in terms of Qatar and people coming back, do you think that might be helpful? That a lot more people may certainly recently have seen firsthand and had those one-to-one experiences that might mean that there is hopefully bubbling a sense of this is somewhere or an area that we can go to and think differently of. Do you think that might have started some sort of transformation at a sort of more grassroots level as to how just normal people feel about that part of the world?
I mean, I think people who have been, for sure, will have probably changed their opinion on it. How easy it is to convert other people and to sort of, share your experience and is tricky. I think you have to be open to it. But if you constantly listen to what, for example, some of the main media channels tell you, and this is by no way is this only like this in the UK, because it was really funny, because for the final I was in Germany visiting my family and the coverage was equally appalling, and people were like, they were like, and it just showed so much ignorance. So for example, when Argentina won in the final, the ruler of Qatar basically put this sort of black cloth onto Messi. And people were like having a field day. They're like, oh my God, why are they doing this? This is so disrespectful. And I was like, hold on a minute. Do you know anything about the culture? Because this is actually the biggest honor you can get in the Middle East. And you just need to like take a step back and just relax here for a minute. So it was so crazy, but it was so out of control. And then suddenly everybody started talking about it, and oh my God, and how is like this wasn't right. And here I am saying, no, you are actually wrong, because you should have looked at the culture of the country, and it was actually a beautiful thing to do, and it was one of the highest honors. But I think it's, if people don't understand and they've never heard and they have never been, it's really difficult to try and change people's perception of it.
Also, Corina, do you think that people had been basically primed to have these very quick knee-jerk reactions? They were almost set up and nudged towards being like that, and then that was reinforced anyway, and that therefore we can almost say, well, we sort of understand whether you behave like that, which you wouldn't, right, or others behave like that. Perhaps that is almost an inevitable part of the melting pot that was created.
Yeah, I would think so. And it's in particular, people that like you follow certain celebrities and you follow certain opinion makers, and then they have an opinion that is maybe uninformed, or and that's how people then make up their mind, and they say, oh yeah, because I don't know, this person said this and this football commentator said that, and this is how it's meant to be. But they've never really had any experience because they'd never really met anyone from there. They'd never even been there, so how would you know different? It's really, I think it's a really tricky subject.
Yeah.
And there really isn't that much information that comes from sort of like the Gulf region that is positive, that is normally in the news. I feel like everything we read here is a lot of like sensationalized stuff, and it's never really about somebody went there, and they really got looked after and they didn't know anybody and people
Yeah.
really cared for them. And there's so many examples of this. And then people say to me, oh, this is very easy for you to say because you know a lot of people there. And I'm like, no, it's not that, because
And you
I also,
didn't start by that anyway, did you? I mean, that would be all very well if you already had an existing network 20 years ago, but you've had to build this, and the only way anyone could build that is with a level of warmth and a decent reception from most people, isn't it?
yeah, definitely. But I also have examples of I went to Saudi about 2 years ago, and it was funny because there was like, at the time there was like Formula One, and after the Formula One they had concerts, and I went to this concert and I lost the people I was with. And then I was supposed to find a car to take me back to the hotel, and the car, I mean, like the traffic jam was crazy and I couldn't find anybody basically. And the security that was outside the concert, obviously I didn't know them, they didn't know me. They were like, oh, don't worry about it. Like, here's a chair, come sit with us, we'll look after you. And I'm like, like this would not happen in the UK. And those to me are those kind of examples where people, they really care and they really want to try and show you their country to the best of what it has to offer. And they want people really to see a different perspective, but you have to be open to it. And I feel, especially as a woman, it's so much harder because like so many women say to me, oh my God, I could never go to Saudi. Like, I'm a woman. What's even going to happen? I have to, I mean, like some of the stories that I've heard is just crazy. They're like, I have to take my husband as a chaperone. And I was like, I went even before Saudi opened up and then never took my husband as a chaperone. So like, this is just crazy. And I think this is just what is stuck in people's minds. And it's very hard to change it. And now to say, oh, look, this is not like it is anymore. But I feel for me, I can almost become, this person to say, look, these were my experiences and I can share that with you. And I am a woman and I'm not from there and I don't speak the language. And this is what happened to me. And it was actually a really good experience. So I can kind of help, I think, take away that fear a little bit for people.
Yeah. Yeah. Gary, is there anything that you wanted to?
Well, I think it's interesting when Corina's talking about those perceptions and things, that some of the stuff that pops into my head are these media stories of, man holds his girlfriend's hand and they get arrested, or, surrounded by guys with swords. And, these are the only things you really hear, and like you say, all that stuff around the World Cup. And it's also interesting what you said there. The media in Germany basically does the same thing, which it's interesting in that sense that these perceptions aren't necessarily organic, in this sense. They are manipulated maybe in some way.
Yeah, and I mean, I think you have to wonder, why this is. And interestingly, I think the FIFA president said it quite well, because he said, is it jealousy or what is it? Because now suddenly the Arab region is, moving ahead, maybe even a lot faster than some of the European countries or some of the Western countries. And it's so funny because I have a friend who is in Dubai, and he's German actually, and he said, half the year I spend in Dubai, especially over the winter months, because the weather is much better,
Yeah, yeah.
which I can totally relate with. And he said, it's really funny when I go back to Germany. He said, I almost feel it's like it's so doom and gloom, and everything is like, oh my God, there's a recession, and there's this drama and that drama, and he's like, you feel depressed. He said, and I come to Dubai and go to, I don't know, Saudi and some of the other places while I'm there. And he said, and it's almost like as if this doesn't exist. Like the world is still fine. Everything is good. People are positive. They're moving on. There's projects. And you wonder if maybe that is something that the West is not, I don't know, they're a little bit jealous of, or maybe they're unhappy that they're moving so fast. I don't know. But, for me, I'd much prefer a more positive outlook than all this doom and gloom.
Well, that's a very interesting point, because from what I've seen, and this is digging a bit, not least to come to speak to you and try to educate myself at least a little about what's happening out in the Middle East generally in terms of construction projects and so on. There's no doubt that they have some absolute flagship constructions there, some very interesting takes on what modernity or post-modernity or post-postmodernity will look like. And whether we want to embrace all of that or not in the West, it looks like the shape of things to come, or certainly a shape of things to come. And shouldn't we be more aware of what these things are that are coming up all over the place, springing up in deserts, in reclaimed parts of ocean and so on. If nothing else, there are amazing feats of engineering and design. So I think we would all tend to agree that it would be better to know what's going on and have a chance to either embrace or reject it, rather than to have just these sort of very emotive stories from that region.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree. And I think, some of the initiatives that are out there are actually quite beautiful. Like if, for example, you look at this, the project that they have on the Red Sea, which is so interesting because, that sort of strip of land and these kind of islands that are sort of Saudi territory, they've never been developed for tourism. Never. They're like virgin with the animals, with the plants, with everything. They have the coral reefs, everything. And it's so amazing that they've now taken this as a project and said, look, we want to develop some of it for tourism, but not everything. And we certainly don't want to make it like a stop for big cruise ships, because that's just not going to be good for nature. And the way we're going to approach this is very much like, we're going to look at this and say, the minute we see there's something changing in like the habitat of the animals or the plants or the coral reefs, we need to take a step back and then see, okay, what can we do to preserve this? Because quite clearly what they did in other places, like Maldives and stuff, is a good example. Some of these coral reefs are totally dying, and now, yes, they have conservation, but it's going to take a long time to regenerate this. So to me, that approach that they're taking, for example, in Saudi, to say, okay, let's work with nature and let's try and make this something that is, still sustainable and is going to be there for our children or grandchildren or great-grandchildren. I think that's a much better approach. And I think, people should look at this almost a bit like as an example. Maybe we can learn from that. Like, there's nothing wrong with it. I think if you have a new technology or you have new ways of doing things, I think it's always good to learn from people.
Yeah, absolutely right. And again, to learn in a way where you see what's happening and you can maybe understand it at a more factual level, and then you can decide if you want to embrace that or parts of that. Great. If there are aspects of it that don't resonate, well, they don't resonate, and that's fine too. But just to have material coming through all the time that is very much there to promote a sudden response and a very manufactured response doesn't seem a healthy way of bringing different parts of the world together to me. And
it also, I think,
yeah,
and I think it also has an impact on people, and that's, I think, like the biggest thing for me. So, for example, I have a I have a friend who's a Kuwaiti lady, and she lives in London, and she had a housekeeper for like 20 years, which was a Filipino lady, which again is very common in the Middle East. And then the Filipino lady fell ill, and she went to one of the hospitals. And the Kuwaiti lady, because she said to me, you know, like she's like my family. She's seen my kids grow up. Of course, I'm going to care for her and go and see her in the hospital every day. However, the interesting bit that happened here is that in the hospital, and this is in the UK, by the way, you know, there were other people working from the Philippines, and they were very much like, oh my God, you know, are you okay? Are they beating you? What are they doing to you? And they treated her, this Kuwaiti lady, they treated her appallingly, because they were like, oh my God, you know, like they had these preconceived ideas that maybe she wasn't treating her housekeeper well. And then basically the sick lady turned around and said, well, I wouldn't have been with them for 20 years if they hadn't treated me well. You know, and then they started slowly changing. But my Kuwaiti friend said to me, you know, every time I came, like they looked me up and down, like, who's she? What's she gonna do? And it's like, and I only had the best intention. So like it kind of works both ways, because, and I'm not saying, you know, there's no stories where this has also been the other way. That's very true. You know, like also, of course, people have been mistreated, but I think it doesn't matter where you look. You know, I think people should just keep an open mind and not judge straight away. And that, to me, like that story for me hit so home. I was like, wow, I can't believe, you know, they treated you like that. And she felt so bad. And this was only because those were the types of things they had heard. So, I mean, I guess maybe if I give a bit more context to this, I think maybe one of the things that makes this such a passion for me is that I hate these stereotypes and being stereotyped. And I think, you know, for me, like I know a lot about that because I grew up in East Germany. And I was about 12 when the wall came down. And then after the wall came down, people were very much like, oh, you're from the East. Like, you don't know anything, you know, but it went both ways, because once I then started working and everything, and then I met my husband who was from the West. And then even it was so ingrained in people that like my grandfather then said, oh, he's from the West. What's he going to be like? And what's his family going to be like? They're probably all like really arrogant. And I'm like, no, they're not. They're just like normal people. And now if you think about this, you know, like now it is what, 30 odd years after the wall came down, and people still think, oh, are you from the East or the West? I'm like, it doesn't matter. It's like the same country. And that's, I think, why I feel so strongly, because I feel I have such a bond, and some of the hospitality that has been shown to me in the Middle East was just so amazing. And some of the stories that I've heard from people, how they've been treated in other countries just because they were Muslim or they were from the Gulf, you know, I could so empathize with that, because it kind of happened to me, not in the same way, but in a very different, you know, situation. But essentially it's all stereotypes, and it's just people not knowing and people not wanting to think, you know, there's something else out there.
Absolutely right. And of course, you could have come into contact with those same sort of stereotypes on coming to the UK as well.
Yeah,
I'm sure. I mean, there's, you know, yeah, exactly.
it's that thing of, well, I guess a lot of what we would hear anyway, the perception of us is beer drinking and like football. And I think I can certainly speak for myself that I don't enjoy either of those. I think Casper is the same. So, you know, sometimes I think, yeah, here we go. Yes, you get it works both ways, but as part of what we're trying to do here with the bridge in the title of our channel is to break down these, what we believe are manufactured divisions, you know, really. Yeah.
And this commonality of humanity, ultimately, you know, beneath all of these different layers of all of the things that are given to us from birth, the truth is that under that, it appears to me, and it appears to me that you're echoing that, Corina, in your own sentiments. And when you talk about empathy, particularly about, you know, these are feelings that come from the heart, that if people are good people, they're good people no matter where they're coming from.
Yeah, exactly. And there's, you know, it's never as black and white as people would like it to, you know, to make it out. I think there's a lot more that to us humans, and there's a lot more to like the different religions and characters, and I think we should just try and appreciate that, because to be honest, ultimately I think that will make your life also much happier, and you will have a much better experience. It's going to be so much more fun.
Yeah, that's a very good point, because ultimately you're potentially penalizing and harming other people. Fine, if you want to do that, do it if you have to, but at the same time understand that that has not necessarily an immediate playback to your own life, but certainly it's one that will come and will lessen it and degrade your own life. So almost why do it? And it might be almost immediate. You know, those sorts of people that you decide not to befriend or to at least find out about, at some point they may be the people you need most. So
Very true, very true.
Gary, is there anything else you wanted to add? Because we're both hopeful that we might persuade Corina to come back again and talk with us a bit more about maybe specific topics rather than a sort of more rounded conversation like this.
Yeah, I think that's probably, if Corina didn't mind, that would be a good idea. Keep it like that.
Yeah. Because I think, Corina, there's many areas that we could dive into that might be a little bit more specific. I mean, even certain areas we've touched on today could become an entire conversation. But we were very keen to highlight what you've done, which is actually an incredible thing for a variety of reasons, some of which you've touched on, and hopefully we'll get the chance in the future to touch on again. But actually what you've given is such a scope that we can now say, you know, do we talk about, for example, these various developments? Because there's all sorts of aspects of those that are incredibly interesting. Do we talk more about the cultural side of things, the differences and the similarities? And are there other host of things that we could talk about that will help to create that bridge, a better bridge of understanding, particularly for those people who, to be fair to most of us, either haven't been or may not ever have the opportunity to visit some of these places? Can we bring it to life in a positive way? And I think if we manage to achieve that, and even today, if we've managed to shed some light on that in a positive manner, then we're doing hopefully some good.
I agree. That sounds is beautiful. Thank you.
Great, and thank you for being so open with us and telling us at least part of a very small slice of your story so far, Corina.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, on that note, Gary.
Until we meet again.
Until we meet again.
Keep it quantum, everybody. And thank you very much, Corina. See you all soon.
Thank you.